So yesterday we discussed list view concept, and we have also seen a practical example on the same. Correct. So today we are going to talk just about constraint layout. I'm not going to take up any other concept. We're just going to talk about constraint layout. Okay. So for that, let us create an application. So there is no target for this application. The target is to make you understand how constraint layout works. In the place of name, you can write constraint layout. So you want to create it in R batch 15. So language is Java, minimum required SDK is API 23. Hit on finish to create this project. As usually we have done it. And now we will explore what is a constraint layout in the first place. You get to see the developer.android.com, which is the official documentation. Of course, Geeks for Geeks and other tutorial websites are also properly explaining constraint layout. I'm not saying that you should not explore other tutorial websites, but um, giving giving the first preference to official documentation will definitely help you in future. So if you do not understand it from the official documentation, feel free to visit any of the other tutorial websites we have. Also feel free to watch YouTube videos. Okay. Just have to understand the concept. That is the primary focus. So but first of all, a constraint is defined. So a constraint layout is a view group which allows you to position and size widgets in a flexible way. It is the easiest of all the layouts we have in Android. The most easiest layout, if there is anything, and that is constraint layout. Okay. So there are various types of constraints that you can use. There is this relative positioning, margining, centering positioning, circular positioning, visibility behavior, dimension constraints, themes, virtual helpers object, optimizers, and so on. You can learn these by clicking on these items. If you hit on relative positioning, you will be jumping into this relative positioning documentation. Yeah, margins are here, but yeah, this is relative positioning. Okay. So relative positioning helps us to create the UI based on the position of other views. I mean, one view will be dependent on the position of the other view. I'll show you that. So these are the list of um, attributes or properties we have for XML. Layout constraint left to the left of, right, left to the right of, right to the left of, right to the right of, top to the top of, top to the bottom of, bottom to the top of, bottom to the bottom of, baseline to the baseline of, start to the end of, start to start of, end to start of, end to end of. So these are the attributes we have. We will understand how these can be made use of. You can keep on reading this documentation, which will definitely give you much more better idea. Okay. But first practice whatever I'm explaining here so that you can explore more and build more complex designs in an easier way. Okay. Please make sure that you are at least. So the least that you can do for yourself is to practice what I just say. Whatever I explain, if you just practice it, it is sufficient at the least. But if you want to excel, that is not that is not really sufficient. Please, please explore. Please explore more and try more. I missed yesterday's lecture. Sorry, Ashish. That's fine, Ashish. We just discussed about list view. Okay. Um, I'll give you an ebook. There you'll have the list of steps that you can make use of. Okay. Don't worry. So coming back, our project is created and we know we have a general step to do. I have a general step to do. That is to change the content SDK and update SDK. I don't know. I am too lazy to update my SDK. Unfortunately, this thing has to be done every time. Okay. So we have constraint layout already. Okay. Where is this? Yeah. You have a constraint layout already. Let us remove this hello world. So we have an empty playground. Correct? So how do we create the views and position them? Let us take the example of a button. I want the button to the center of the screen. So if I take this button, place it to the center of the screen, and run this application, let's see the output. You see that the button is coming onto the top left corner because this button is not positioned. And how do we position this button? With the help of these four dots, which are called as constraints. Okay, these four dots are called the constraints. So this is called the top constraint. This is called the left constraint. This is called the bottom constraint. And this is called the right constraint. Okay. So only if you position them, the actual position on the output would change. For example, if I position the button to the bottom, let us say, so how do I position that? Simply, sorry. How do I position that? Select the view, go to the bottom constraint, take your mouse over on top of it, hit your left mouse click, and then drag it to the end of the screen. There will be a blue line appearing that gives you constraint, right? So now that the output is like this, if you run the application, can you guess what will be the output? Will it be bottom center? Three options. Will it be bottom center? Will it be at the bottom right? Or will this button be at bottom left? What do you think? Okay, Altaf Raja gave the correct answer. Sarfraj Khan, first one in the sense what? Bottom left or right or center? Okay. So Altaf Raja is correct. Bottom left is the right answer. So let us run the application and see why we get it in bottom left. Okay, Hemant is also right. The reason why we are getting it to the left is because we position the button across the vertical line or vertical space of the design. But we did not position the button across the horizontal space. So for the button, we did not give any direction where to go. On the horizontal axis, we did not give the button a proper direction. We did not ask the button to go to the right, or we did not ask the button to go to the left. As the default position is always left when it comes to horizontal axis, the button moved to left. The button moved to left. On the vertical axis, the default position would be top. Okay. So now drag this right constraint to the right hand side of the screen. Now tell me, if I run the application now, will I get the button at the bottom center, at the bottom right, or at the bottom left? Where would I get this button if I run the application right now? Altaf Raja is right. Sweta is right. Akansha is right. Cool. Most of you are right. Correct. So, to position your view, on constraint layout, at least one of the top constraint or bottom constraints must be set, and at least one of the left constraint and right constraints to be set. So you need two constraints at the least. One from top and bottom, at least one from top and bottom, and at least one from left and right. Okay, hope this point is clear. Now, if I want to drag this button to the center of the screen, with two ropes, I'm pulling this button to the bottom of the screen, and I'm pulling the button to the right hand side of the screen. So I will place the similar kind of rows that pulls this button to the top of the screen, and another constraint that pulls the button to the left hand side of the screen. As we pull this button with equal amount of force on all the sides of the screen, button appears at the center of the screen. Now let me know, if I run this application, where would I get this button? At the top left, or at the bottom, or at the bottom right, bottom left, bottom center? Where will I get this button? Where will I get this button, guys? Altaf Raja is right. You will get the button at the center of the screen. Fantastic. All right. So when I tap this button, I get to see there is a constraint widget coming up on the screen. Do you see that? Sweta is also right. So do you see this? So with these sliders, you can move your button on the horizontal axis with this slider, and vertical axis with this slider. If I move this slider a little bit upwards, button will be going a little bit upwards. If I keep it at 50, it remains at the center of the screen. And if I drag it down to the screen, the button would move relatively in the same direction, in the same position. Got it? So you want your button not here, but here you want it. There might be places where you want to do it. So you can position your view just like this by sliding the vertical axis. If you slide in the horizontal axis, your button would move on the horizontal axis. Okay. So the some proportion of the button, if you want to proportionately, or if you want to proportionate the position of your button, you can do it by sliding this. Also, as this button is constrained on all four sides, you are getting zero dips on all four sides. But if you want to maintain some space, I'll show you that later. But let us come to these symbols. So what are these symbols? So if this is the symbols we have, okay, you're not able to see it properly, it seems. So if these symbols we have, let us say if we have these symbols, they represent, what do they represent? Wrap content. Not content handler, wrap content. So if you see a symbol like this, this represents fixed width. And if you have a resistance symbol, you know the resistance symbol, right? I cannot copy it. I cannot write it here. Okay, I'll try to do it. I'll try to do one resistance symbol so that you will understand. Can. Tab. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm unable to draw. So these two symbols you remember. Third symbol will automatically be remembered. Don't worry. So as of now, you see that you have wrap content on both the height and width. Here also wrap content on height also. If I click on it once, it becomes fixed width. If I click on this once, it becomes fixed width. Okay. Now you see the symbols correctly. If I tap on it once again, it matches the constraints across the width of the screen. Also, if I tap on this once again, it matches the constraints of the height. So this is the resistance symbol, right? This represents match constraints. Now your button is not maintaining any space from the top, left, bottom, and right. So select the button, get this diagram in place, and now choose whatever the width you want from the top, or whatever the margin you want from the left, whatever the margin you want from the bottom, and whatever the margin you want from the right. So far, so good. So far, it's so easy. So if I run the application, I get the same output. So I'm getting the same output. Fantastic. Now what's next? So let us get this button into a normal design. Okay. Let's do not have spaces on all the four sides of the screen. And now let us see how to create this button to the center of the screen by code. So I'm deleting this, going to the split mode. I just want to make you see how do we code it as well. So you have a button, right? As soon as you select a button, you get the layout width to wrap content. Layout height also you can select to wrap content. So the default position of the button is at the top left. If you see, you can give some text on this. I would say button. So how do we arrange this? I told you that at least one constraint between top and bottom and at least one constraint between left and right should be set. So I would like to set all the constraints. So left constraint to the left of. So you should choose this option. Layout constraint left to the left of. Parent. Simple. In the similar way, right to the right of. Parent. In a similar way, bottom to the top of. Parent. No, bottom to the bottom of. And then top to the top of. Top to the top of parent. And your button comes at the center of the screen. Now tell me which one is easy. Uh, So if I want to change the width to match constraints, I would write 0 dp. If I want to change the height to match constraint, I will write 0 dp. Cool, right? So good to see. Okay, how many of you are actually following and how many of you are not able to follow? Can I get that information? Because we are um, entirely focusing on the constraint layer. We are not talking about any particular application in general. Okay, we're talking about constraint layer and how to use it. That is the only agenda we have for this day. Okay, so now that you know how to create a button, cool. Let us remove this. What if I want two buttons? So the option is that I have two buttons. So I'd like to change the names on these buttons. I'd like to say button 1 and button 2 I would like to say is button 2. Now both these buttons both these buttons must be occupying the entire screen space, where the first button occupies the first half of the screen, the second button occupies the second half of the screen. How will I do that? First? On the horizontal axis, first let us put this button in place. Also, this button I want to put it horizontally in place. Okay. Now select these two buttons, right click, go to chains and create a vertical chain, so that both the buttons will be chained vertically and their styling will be, see, chains, create vertical chain style. It is spread, right? It is selected as spread. But if you go to chains and go to vertical chain and create packed, both of them will come together. But I don't want it. Okay. Should I repeat this concept? To chain two elements, not just buttons, two elements, just have to select those two elements and create a vertical chain by right clicking on them, going to chains and creating and selecting create vertical chain. That creates a vertical chain that aligns these two components appropriately. Now, what is this button one? How would this button one occupies first half of the screen, and how does this button two occupies the second half of the screen? How is it ever possible? It is possible. How? I'll show you. So on both these buttons, I want to change the width to 0 dp, so that you will be occupying uh, the fullest width of these constraints. Now for the first button, what I would like to do is I'd like to change this wrap content to match constraints. Oh shit. Now you can see that the first button is occupying more of space. The second button is only occupying the space it needs across the height of the screen. So select the second button and do the same on this as well. Now your first button is occupying half of the screen. The second button is occupying half of the screen. So chains can also be done horizontally as well. So I'm doing Control Z. Yeah. So now these two buttons, I want to chain them horizontally. So they are not constrained yet. You can select both of them, right click, go to chains, create a horizontal chain. Nice. So you can also set the relative constraining, like how. So if the first button is constrained and the second button is not constrained, so what all you can do is you can set the top constraint of button 2 to the top constraint of button 1, bottom constraint of button 2 to the bottom constraint of button 1. So that you can do. Okay. It is not always like you have to put the top constraint to the top of the screen and bottom constraint to the bottom end of the screen. You can also adjust the button based on the relative positions of other views. This is also possible. I will explain it again. See this button too, you can also set it to the top of the screen and bottom end of the screen. That is okay. However, you can also adjust the button position based on the first button also. You can adjust the second button's position based on the first button also. For that, what are we supposed to do? Let us remove these constraints. Hit Control. Okay, I'll show it again. Hit Control and take your mouse over on top of this constraint. You get it in red color. Choose it. Do the same with the bottom constraint as well. Now set the top constraint to the top constraint of the button. Now set the bottom constraint to the bottom constraint of the first button. Great. Now I want these two buttons to occupy equal amount of space across the width of the screen. Then what to do? Simply change this symbol to match constraint and do the same on the second button. Nice. So if I move the first button, the second button also would move appropriately. For example, if I move it across, the second button is also getting moved. Correct? Why? Because they are both connected relative to sorry, because the button 2 is connected in relation with button 1. That is the very reason. That is the very reason why we are able to uh, move the first button and let the second button follow the first button. Okay. There is another concept called baselining. So what is it? Let us have another two buttons. The reason why I'm taking only buttons is because they are more flexible. They are more easy to understand, like for constraint layout especially. If I take in a switch, you will find a small view. If I take in a if you take an image, you'll find it little big. If I take a text view, I need to change a lot of things on it. So button is already flexible. That is why I'm using these. In the place of buttons, you can think about any other views except for baselining. So baselining will not work for other views, only for button it will work. So let us say you are positioning this button, the first button you are positioning, okay? The first button is positioned, right? Left constraint, I don't want to do it, okay? I want to have this button, the second button, I want to have the second button baseline to first button and see what happens on that. Right click on the first button, sorry, second button, click on show baseline. You get a small white color horizontal line. This is called the baseline. You take it and put it to the first button. That baselines your second button. Very easy stuff. Now we can select both the buttons, right click and change them horizontally. If you move the first button, the second button would automatically move with the help of baseline. Got it? All right. So how can I get this similar kind of design with this baselining concept in place? Simple. Change these symbols to match constraint and change this one as well to match constraints. Everything is set now. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Let us remove these buttons. We should understand about something called guidelines. Let us say if you have a horizontal guideline. So you'll get a guideline like this. So you can put it at any point of your interest. Suppose you want to design uh, some things here, like okay, let us also have a vertical guideline so that you can understand both of them at once. So once the vertical guideline is created, I will have some space here. So this is not a, okay, right. So this one I have, we have got four blocks now, one, two, three, four, if you can see properly. So let us say if I have a button here that is set to the bottom constraint or the horizontal constraint and the vertical guideline, right to the right, top to the top, okay. You are changing this to match constraints on both the ends. You could see some design, right? You could see some design. Change this to 32 on all the ends. On all the ends, you change this to 32. Because I just want to differentiate the design. Okay, 32 is too much. Maybe 16 would be sufficient. Okay, right. So in the similar way, let us create all the buttons here as well. Like in here, I will have a button top to the top, left, right to the left, right to the right, right to the left, 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 right to the left right to the right, bottom to the bottom. Simple. Also change the design. Like so this is button 2, which will maintain 16 dips of space on all the corners of this screen. You also have these two spaces again. Button left to the left of, left to the right of, right to the right, left to the left, right to the right, top to the top, bottom to the bottom. Change this to match constraint. Maintain 16 dips of space. The reason why I'm doing it, you'll understand it in short time. You can also have a third button. So now let's divide it into four equal blocks. If you see, 4 blocks, not equal, but 4 blocks. Correct? And I'm creating whatever the designs I would like on all these blocks. So vertical guidelines and horizontal guidelines would help you to do it, as well as it will help you to come up with more complex designs easily. Now that I have 4 buttons, right? What if I move this vertical guideline to the right of the screen? The design is adjusted accordingly. What if I move this horizontal guideline across the height of the screen? The design is again adjusted automatically. Correct? If I have 4 different kinds of designs that I have to do, I can do it using these guidelines. And also, interestingly, you can set your constraints to the horizontal and vertical guidelines. That is also possible. So now if you run the application, the output would look a little different, but yeah, the similar output you'll get it. See, that's it. So you can have 4 different designs here. 1, 2, 3, 4 different designs you can have. Also, along with this, let's remove this code. Also, along with this, we also have something called vertical barrier and horizontal barrier. Okay, vertical barrier. I'll show you in an appropriate syntax. Yeah, let us get back the same design. Okay, so there is an important topic. If you select all, you get to see all the constraints and the design is more complex. If you hit on this symbol, which is there here, clear all the constraints will be cleared, unfortunately. With this, all the constraints are cleared. If you select a button, those 4 constraints are seen. Select this button, those 4 constraints are seen. Select this one, 4 constraints. If you run the application, all these components will appear at the top left corner. That is the more interesting point. Right? Only one button I am able to see. What about the other buttons? Because they are not constrained. Now there is another magic wand which says infer constraints. So the constraints will be automatically created for each view, but in a different way, not in the way you want it. Okay. So if you run the application, there might be differences or there might be differences in the output when you use infer constraints. Okay. So there is a little difference. Like in the previous output, you got a little less width and little width for buttons on the right hand side. But now they are of all mostly the same size because of the infer constraints, probably. All right. So with this knowledge, we can proceed to create wonderful UIs. Right. So every time we create a UI from constraint layer, you get to learn at least a little bit or a little thing for sure. I recommend you to go through this documentation without fail. Okay. Just read about it. Also, there are There are hundreds of tutorials available. You can explore that later, but first go through this. Try to understand this one. If you understand developer documentation, you can start up a new tutorial blog all yourself. All right. So that's it for the day. We have talked about a few topics in constraint layout, which will help us to come up with beautiful designs in the future. Constraint layout is most commonly used, Altaf, because it makes your task easy, right? For a linear layout, you have so many things to take care of. But for constraint layout, it is just a few clicks away. So when it is just a few clicks away, why will we take the trouble of using linear layout? However, sometimes we are supposed to use linear layout. That is also there. However, constraint layout is more popular than linear layout. Now, relative layout is replaced with constraint layout. That is the reason I am not explaining relative layout because it is not used in the market, already out of the market. That is why I'm not talking about relative layout. Constraint layout is widely used and it has also replaced relative layout. So we used to feel relative layout is so very easy, but constraint layout is much easier than relative layout. Cool. Only by practice we get this thing. Don't worry about it. Cool. So let me push these changes to GitHub. Sorry, Bitbucket. So we use Bitbucket, right? I'm sharing this code to Bitbucket. Okay, I'm not sure which remote to use. Origin name master. How many times will it ask me to sign in? Okay, right. So the changes are pushed to GitHub. You can find the link here. Please have it handy, guys. Please do have it handy. All right. Thank you so much. We are closing early today. However, if the concept is understood, I'm happy. Cool. Take care. We'll meet you tomorrow at sharp 7 o'clock without fail. And I want you to be at sharp 7 o'clock as well. Thank you, guys. Tomorrow we are going to discuss more interesting topic, and that is about recycler view. We will be completing half part of the favorite movies application. So do not miss out on the session tomorrow and the day after. Thank you. Take care.